Welcome to Digital Learning, an initiative of Directorate of Collegiate Education, Government of Karnataka. Two Friends is a short story written by Gay D. Maupassant, prescribed for second semester BA General English, Bengaluru North University. In this session, the elements of the plot will be discussed in detail. I am Nandana NG, Assistant Professor of English, GFGC, Bagepalli. The contents of the presentation: learning objectives, session outcome, recap of previous knowledge, plot of the story, the elements of the plot, each will be discussed in detail, exposition, rising action, climax, falling action and resolution, recapitulation, and finally multiple choice questions. The learning objectives of this session: to review the characteristics of the literary element of a plot. So, the following concepts will be discussed in detail. What is an exposition? What is rising action? What is a climax? What is falling action? And what is resolution? So, at the end of this session, students will be able to identify plot analysis in the short story Two Friends, exposition, rising action, climax, falling action and resolution, identify the relevance of language in literature. Let us try to recapitulate what we discussed in the previous session. The story is about two friends, Monsieur Maupassant and Monsieur Savage, who meet in Paris during the Franco-Prussian War of 1871. Monsieur Maupassant and Monsieur Savage meet on a Parisian street and decide to risk going fishing together in the countryside like they did before the war. The war has brought them nothing but sorrow, poverty and hunger, taking away of the everyday pleasures of life, freedom and peace. Caught up in fishing and discussing politics, the friends are captured and brought before a Prussian officer who demands that they tell him the French password. Maupassant and Savage refuse. They bid each other farewell and are executed by the Prussians, who toss their bodies in the river. The story Two Friends exposes the dehumanizing effects of war. It also describes the futility of war, and the innocent civilians who are caught up in events beyond their control are permanently changed by their experiences. The primary characters involved in the story, the protagonists or the characters who take the story forward or who are the lead characters. They are the two friends, Monsieur Maupassant and Monsieur Savage. The antagonists are the characters which are opposite or contradictory to the protagonist. The antagonists here would be the Franco-Prussian War itself and the Prussian general and soldiers. So, if you really look at it, not many characters except for the two friends who are the primary characters. The third important character would be the Prussian general. So, this is how a plot analysis can be depicted in a graph here. The elements of the plot: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action and resolution. What is exposition? First comes exposition. Herein the characters are introduced, the setting in which the entire story starts or takes place, and the conflict. Remember, there should be a conflict. If everything is peaceful, there is no story there. So, all these elements come under exposition. And then the rising action. As the line or the graph spirals upward, it indicates rising action or events which increase conflict. Two or simultaneously 2-3 events happen wherein a sort of a conflict, it increases, it depicts rising action. It all culminates in the climax, which is the high point in the conflict, and later, once the climax has been reached, there is a spiraling downward from then on. The falling action, or these are the events which occur after the climax, and then finally resolution, how the entire thing sums up, or the life afterward. In fact, you can say that life after a tragedy is never happy, but still we shall see how the entire story starts from exposition. There is rising action, it culminates in a climax. Climax is the ending of a tragedy, and then the falling action, the events after climax, and finally resolution or the life afterward. Exposition. The story opens in Paris in January 1871 at the height of siege of Paris. Monsieur Morisot is a watchmaker, bored, hungry and depressed. Walking along the boulevard, by chance he bumps into an old friend, Monsieur Savage, a draper with whom he used to go fishing before the war. They shake each other's hand, happy for stumbling across each other. So this is the main event. How they, when they bump into each other, from then on the story proceeds forward. Conflict. What is the conflict in the story? Unfortunately, they have not been able to meet for quite a while due to the war. They lament. While drinking at a nearby cafe, they both end up discussing, reminiscing the olden days. They lament, they are miserable that they are not able to go to fishing due to the war, especially on such a nice day. This leads to the conflict there. The rising action happens while drinking. Monsieur Savage recklessly, carelessly, impulsively suggests the two of them go down to their old fishing spot, which is in occupied territory. So this is the rising action. Excited, they both agree. They are excited now because they are very happy that the like old times they can go fishing, and this time with their fishing rods receive the password from the colonel and make their way into dangerous territory. All this event suggestion, the action is rising. They carefully make their way to the water and they both begin to fish. So this indicates rising action. Events increasing the conflict. Now everything has to proceed forward. Suddenly, German soldiers arrive and surround the two friends. Now, this increases the conflict. They bind the men and bring them to an officer. The Prussian officer tells the men he will kill them for being suspected spies unless they give him the password that allowed them to come out into the area. The Prussian officer tries to individually persuade each man to give up the password, but to no avail, or it is useless. Both the men refuse. You can see how all these events, the soldiers surrounding them, binding them, arresting them, forcing them to reveal the password, and how they decline, and how the officer gives the order to kill them. All these are the events which increase the conflict. Climax. Climax is the peak of the story, or climax is the ending of a tragedy. This is the peak of the action. And what happens in the climax? Morisot and Savage firmly and loyally maintain their silence in the face of the Prussian officer's threats and temptations, and the plot reaches its climax as the two friends shake hands and are executed by the enemy fire. So the killing of the two friends forms the climax. Falling action. After the death, the two soldiers tie Morisot's and Savage's body to rocks and throw them into the water. So we can say that the story is, all the loose ends are now being tied. Now both the bodies are tied to rocks and thrown into the water. Resolution. Life afterward, life after the killing of the two friends. Noticing the fish the men had caught, the Prussian officer orders the fish to be cooked and goes back to smoking his pipe. Life continues from then on, but the two lives are gone forever. So to recapitulate, the elements of the plot are as follows, and we discussed in detail each element according to the story Two Friends. In Exposition, we saw how Monsieur Morisot, a watchmaker, bumps into an old friend, Monsieur Savage, a draper with whom he used to go fishing before the war. They reminisce, or they recollect their pre-war fishing days. The conflict happens when they lament not being able to fish during the war, especially on such a nice day. The rising action takes place when recklessly Monsieur Savage suggests fishing. They also seek the help of a colonel to go to a fishing spot. Further events increasing conflict also occur when the Prussians showed up. The two friends stopped fishing and the Prussians pointed guns at them and asked for the password. Climax, the end of the story. They were killed by the Prussians because they didn't say anything, and the falling action is the soldiers tying Morisot's and Savage's bodies to rocks and throwing them into the water. Resolution, the life after. Noticing the fish the men had caught, the Prussian officer orders the fish to be cooked and goes back to smoking his pipe. Their lives are over, but for the Prussian officer, it was just a small blimp in his everyday routine, and he just goes back to smoking his pipe. Let us assess ourselves. Multiple choice question. First question: why do the two friends think they can go safely to their old fishing place? Option A: the river is far from the scene of battle. Option B: the French colonel will permit them to pass. Option C: they are both members of the French militia. Or D: they are brave. The answer is option B: the French colonel will permit them to pass. Where is the old fishing spot where the two friends are very nostalgic about and where they want to go? The fishing spot is nearby, in occupied territory, within the city, or none of the above. And the answer is option B, in occupied territory. The Prussian officer suspects them to be soldiers, civilians, friends, or spies. And the answer is spies. What does the Prussian officer want from them? He is asking them something, and what is it that he wants from them? Password, food, fish, or water? And the answer is option A, password. According to Gay de Maupassant's short story, Two Friends, how does the author feel about the war, or what are his views about war? He believes war is futile. He believes war is hard but necessary. He believes war is a test of courage, or he believes war leads to a better society. By now, we are familiar with the viewpoint of Gay de Maupassant, and the answer is option A. He believes war is futile. References used for the presentation. Thank you.